Hi and welcome back to my channel. This feels very formal today because I've got my tablet in front of me, but that's because I decided to do a mammoth undertaking. As you know, I like to see myself as an average reader, and I was thinking about what an average reader like myself likes to read. And something I've currently been on is celebrity autobiographies, memoirs. I normally go to Audible, listen to them on there, and it got me thinking about memoirs and autobiographies that don't exist yet, or will never exist, I guess, in the case of some of them. And I was thinking, what's my dream lineup for some upcoming autobiographies? Some of the people that I list do already have autobiographies, but for me personally, I think they were released so long ago or at different stages of their lives, so it would be more interesting to get the perspective of how things have changed and just to see where they're at right now with everything. I think some of my picks will probably shock some of you. The list is essentially actors and musicians. I did consider some authors, but I think it's harder to see them as celebrities, even though there are those rare few authors who've made it into like massive. They're not really seen on the same level as, wrongly or rightly, musicians and actors and everything else in between. So the format's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to give you the name of the celeb and then tell you why I want the memoir / autobiography. And then, if possible, just to fill in that void that I've left by bringing it up, I'll recommend a book that can maybe keep you going until they do actually release that book. And if it never happens, then maybe just keep reading that book over and over again. Although there were some cases where I wasn't able to give a recommendation for a book, so I'm sorry in advance for that. This isn't an exhaustive list, so this isn't me saying these are the only people I ever want to write a autobiography or anything like that ever again. These are just the people that came to mind when I sat down and started to think about this for this video. And also, I just want to be clear that this is a safe space, so I'm not out to slander celebrities or argue about who's the best. These are my opinions. If you don't agree with them, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't mean we need to fall out. I don't want to see anyone arguing with each other in comments or anything like that. It's all just for fun. If I love someone and you don't, that's fine. We can both still exist in the same place. So to get the ball rolling, the first one is someone who was very much a thread through my childhood. So I saw a lot of their films, as many people my age will have, and they were sort of seen as silly. And then as time has gone on, they've started to be taken a lot more seriously since they started to open up. And it is Jim Carrey. I would love a memoir / autobiography by Jim Carrey. I think it would be amazing just to get all the behind the scenes stuff for those absolutely massive films he was in, like Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, Liar Liar, Bruce Almighty, The Cable Guy. I mean, there's so many films. I'd love to hear what it was like working on those. But then also more recently, he's talked about his mental health and he's delved a lot more into politics and just really get into what it is that makes him really, because he's a bit of an enigma. I know he did like a documentary on painting and he's sort of done other interviews and things. I think one with David Letterman, which I've seen those, but I just think there's something about when they write it all out and you can digest it over months or weeks or days, and it just feels like you really get to know them. So I think that would be incredible. As far as recommendations go, we're not off to a great start. There's lots of unauthorized biographies about him with terrible ratings on various book selling sites. I did see that he released a satirical memoir in 2020, and I did look at the reviews for it, and it's a very mixed bag, so I can't claim to have read this, but it has gone on my to-be-read / wish list. I think people struggle with the fact that he made it so satirical that they don't really know what's true and what isn't. So instead of it being sort of like, oh, that was quite funny, some people were very angry and upset about it. So I can't really comment on that until I've read it myself. It's called Memoirs and Misinformation. As I say, it was released in 2020, so if you want to read about Jim Carrey's sort of life, then absolutely go and check that out. My next pick is, I can't even define this person or what they mean to me. When I think about like stars in the old sense of what a star is, or like a legend and the platform they used to be on, this person is absolutely up there. And it feels like they're a dying breed, and that sounds like a very bad pun. So I didn't mean it to be one. In the sense that these legends are now going extinct, and it doesn't feel like in the social media era that we're in that there's much room for them to become that status again, because we hear so much about them. We have so much engagement with these celebrities all the time. So it is Prince. I absolutely love Prince. I love Prince's music. I love Prince's visual aesthetic. As a guitar player, he is my absolute guitar idol. I actually have a replica guitar based on his Mad Cat, which is my pride and joy. I mean, I can see it as I'm talking. Maybe I'll do a little flash to it now. I don't think there were many artists who were as mysterious as Prince. So you can learn a bit about him in his songs, but there's not many interviews. He didn't do any long form interviews. There were some interviews when he intentionally played with the media, so he would have a veil over his face and not answer any questions. His backing singer or dancer would speak for him, or he would just flat out lie about things just to keep the mystery going. Obviously there was the famous house, Paisley Park, where all sorts of things happened, parties, recording and stuff, but there was very much an attitude of once things have happened there, we don't talk about them. And I think despite being raised on his music, I mean, I've been listening to Prince since I was probably a toddler. I feel like I don't really know much about him from his own words. I've got about 15 books on Prince. I'd have to do a separate video about them. All sorts of different accounts about him, from people who worked with him, people who didn't work with him, tabloid nonsense, everything. Some of them people buy me as gifts, so I just feel like, oh yeah, I'll take it. I don't want to say I don't want that rubbish. I've got studio log books and things like that. But what I really wanted was a book from him. And one of my biggest regrets to this day is my mum coming to me when I was a teenager. I was about 14. She said to me, do you want to go and see Prince in concert? He's coming to the UK, he's doing a tour, I'll pay for you to go see him. And I said, it's okay mum, I'll wait till the next one. And the next one never really came around for me, and I never got to see him. Some of you may know, or may not know, that in 2016, he actually announced earlier in that year that he was going to write a memoir. Unfortunately, it was the same year that he died. So a few years after that, they actually did take what he'd submitted to his agent and writing partner at the time, and they did put it into a book, The Beautiful Ones, which is one of my favourite Prince books. Basically 4 sections. There's an introduction from the man that he worked with on the book, and then there's his own words, what he was going to submit. And then there's sort of photos and like lyrics and things like that. It's a really beautiful tribute to him, and I was fortunate enough to go to the launch party for this book. So the man that he worked with, Dan Piepenburg, I think I've said that right, he was at the party. There was live music, it was in London, in Camden, and we all got given a copy of the book, and it is one of my relics. I absolutely love this book, and if you're a Prince fan, I highly recommend it, purely for those pages in the middle where it's what Prince was actually writing himself. It was really philosophical. He talks about his childhood, about music. He's quite political in it. It's a Prince that we've not really heard before, and just little things that are very Prince, like instead of using the letter I, he draws an I, which sounds annoying, but I really liked it, and I just, even now I think, oh, what would have that full book look like? Like, it would have been amazing. And I don't know if you can see, but it's just such a nice cover. It looks really nice on my shelf, and yeah, it's one of my prized possessions. My other recommendation for Prince books, because as I say, there's so many, one by his ex-wife, Maite Garcia. I think I've probably said her name wrong. It's called The Most Beautiful, and it's basically an account of their time together. Not many people got as close as she did to Prince, and even though in just describing it, it sounds like some sort of tell-all gossip rag, it really isn't. It's a really, really nice tribute to him. As I say, I'm a massive fan, so if I did think it was terrible, there was no way I would be holding this up saying, yeah, you should totally read this. There were some negative reviews out there for this. I think it's because it's so honest that it shows him in every aspect. So he's not some perfect legend on a pedestal. He is quite flawed, and he sounds very difficult to be around at times, and very selfish, but then we can all be those things, and I think that's why it appealed to me so much, because it really was like a human account of this legend. My next pick for a possible memoir / autobiography would be someone who I think is up there with a very few handful of people who've created, like established a giant world, an imaginary world, that without that world, our world would be completely different, and that is George Lucas. I think, as a massive nerd and Star Wars fan, what he's done for science fiction is just, and again, I know the people that hear that and think, oh, he stole this from this and this from this and this from that. Like, I'm not here to debate that. I'm talking strictly about George Lucas and Star Wars. I'd be interested to hear about all the details surrounding how it came about, how he worked with his team to choose the people for the roles, working with Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher. How does he feel about Star Wars now, given that he's sort of handed it over to Disney and they're doing what they're doing with it? Again, I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying I would like to hear it from him. I've loved Star Wars my entire life. I had the original trilogy video cassettes that my uncle gave us when we were tiny, and we were just raised again on it. And then the prequels came out, episode 1, 2, 3, and I know lots of people don't like them. They're my guilty pleasure. And I even like the newer trilogy, which again, I know people don't like it. I enjoy it. I just enjoy Star Wars. I think I've had different forms of lightsabers right the way throughout my life. And when it comes to recommendations, I had a look, lots of unauthorized biographies. One that stood out, which I had to wishlist, was George Lucas' Alive by Brian Jones. The gentleman that wrote it also profiled Jim Henson, which was critically acclaimed as excellent, basically. So my next pick could be seen as divisive, but I don't really see why. Again, I've stressed that this is just fun. We're just speculating, just ideas about what it could be. Taylor Swift. So firstly, I don't profess to be some big Swiftie who's been a lifelong fan of the music. At the same time, I'm not someone who devotes every hour of my day to telling people that I don't like Taylor Swift as if it's a personality type. I think regardless of your personal opinions when it comes to her rise has been just... I don't think anyone can actually put into words how massive she is. Like, her tour's ongoing at the moment, and I got to witness the change in London, sort of similar to when we've had other artists that I'll mention later on here. It's not just like, oh yeah, this person's playing and I heard about it on the radio. It's like you walk around Central and people are wearing the merch and everything, and you can feel the change in the city. Like, all these different people have come here for this person, and I just wonder, what is it like to live in that? And also, with the divisive nature of it and a lot of the hate that she gets, how do you balance that? Because I know I couldn't, and I'm a mental health professional, and I think it would be too much for me. So I would be so interested to hear her story in her own words. Even things as simple as every time she puts an album out, it destroys the records from the one previous. And I know there's a handful of other artists that have to face this pressure, but what must that feel like? And we've sort of seen how that affects these people when you look at artists from, say, the 80s who were absolutely top of their game and sort of fell off as the years went on, and now they're just seen as like, oh yeah, that person that used to do whatever. And like, what does that do to your psychology? I really didn't know much about her, and then I watched Miss Americana with my younger sister, and I was really, really impressed with her. When it comes to recommendations, I'm not going to profess to be some Swiftie that knows all the different books. I know that the Swifties are excitable, so I'll let any Swifties that watch this tell you in the comments the best book to read about Taylor Swift. For the next pick, when I talk about Jim Carrey being the Fred of my childhood, I'd say this person is part of the Fred of my teenage years, adult life, right to this day, and just continually on the loop. So it is Jennifer Anniston. I feel like I don't really need to express any further than that, but I'll try. I read Matthew Perry's book, sadly, before he passed away, which that was just devastating, because I think I'd read his book a couple of months before and really resonated with him. Again, I think it's part of my job is, so I'm a mental health nurse, I do a lot of addictions recovery work, and to read his story and see just how hard he had tried to overcome his addiction, and then for him to pass away just months after that, at the height of sort of, I don't want to call it a comeback, because I don't think he was seen as someone who'd gone anywhere, but I think we were all really rooting for him. And then so to read his book and get the insight of what it was like to be part of that group of actors that did Friends and just completely blow up, and they were getting paid just obscene amounts of money, and life just changed like that. And he talked about his struggles with it, but also talked about his relationship with Jennifer and the connection they had. And it was just so interesting, and I would love to hear her take on it all, because at one point she was on a complete pedestal. People were getting the Rachel haircuts and things. I remember all of that when I was at school. People were just obsessed with Friends, and it's sort of similar to what I was talking about with Taylor Swift. Like, what is it like to be in that? And I always find it interesting to hear people's opinions and thoughts on what it is like to be in those really bizarre scenarios. And Friends is my go-to comfort. Like, I just go back to it all the time. I would just put it on in the background if I'm cooking and things. It feels like they're my friends, which I know is so tragic, but I just love it. The obvious recommendation here would be, if you haven't read it, and I don't think there are many Friends fans that haven't, would be Matthew Perry's memoir, which I don't have here to show you because I lent it to my auntie. Unfortunately, I can't hold it up, but maybe I'll put a picture here. so then you can see what it looks like if you didn't already know. So earlier I was talking about the extinction, my version of extinction, of legends, and I think another legend that we lost who was completely underappreciated and did incredible things for music and social justice and many other things is George Michael. I adore George Michael. I can't even put into words how much I adore George Michael. So he is another person who's already got a autobiography out. So I think it was released in 1990, which is the year I was born. He passed away in 2016. So for those 26 years, when you consider when that book came out, so he'd just left Wham, he'd become a solo artist, he'd done his Faith album, seen as this male pop star, straight male pop star, massive following, globally successful. And then in those years, he was outed as gay. He didn't come out as gay, he was forced to come out as gay. And his life just dramatically changed, basically. And he had lots of different trials. He lost his partner to AIDS. He released music to people who would refuse to play it because of the lyrical content being about men, and just lots of things like that. And so he sort of experienced being really, really up there, famous, then down, then up, then down, then up, and just lots and lots of waving and sort of zigzagging of his career, and then battles of addiction as well. And I think that he is someone who paved the way for the Ollie Alexanders and Sam Smiths and the Little Nas X's to do what they do and be celebrated for it. And he feels like he took all those shots and was just completely underappreciated for it. And on a personal level, when I think about George Michael, so my mum is obsessed with George Michael, and growing up, it was just a known thing that is her thing. She loves George Michael. And then when he came out as gay, that love did not change. She still adores George Michael. So for me, as a young gay man, like as a teenager, I knew, okay, well, they love this George Michael guy because it's like a family thing. My nan loved him, my aunties loved him. So I was like, well, I don't think they'll be horrible to me. So it made it easier, which sounds bizarre, but it made it easier for me to come out. And I did. And I'm very, very blessed to have a family that did not reject me and all of these things. But I do feel like I owe something out to George Michael in such a strange way. So he's got a special place in my heart. I would obviously recommend Bear, which is his autobiography, but he himself said before he died that it's not exactly the true account of his life because he had to leave out a lot because he wasn't going to talk about being gay at that time. It's also really hard to get hold of that book, so if you've got it and you don't know, it's like gold dust. I think they go for like £100 if you've got it because they stopped printing it. My recommendation would be Wham! George and Me by Andrew Ridgeley, who, I don't know how you wouldn't know, but he was the other person in Wham, aside from Shirley and Pepsi, who was with George every day and knew about George being gay before we did. It's a very honest account of what it was like to be in a band with George Michael and sometimes feel like you were overshadowed by him. It's a really, really good book. I'd highly recommend it. When it comes to Hollywood cliches, I feel like my next pick, as I just have them all attached to them in some way or another, some positive, some negative, and everything in between. There's a lot of things to lots of different people, but to me, she is the voice, that's a hint, the greatest singer of all time. Whitney Houston. I just think, Whitney Houston. You know, when you talk about divas that sing, people get up about, oh, they don't write their own music and they don't do that. But in terms of vocal technique, so I did, a little side note, I did music to degree level. I was always at school doing music. So I studied it from the age of 11 up to 22. And there's just something about Whitney Houston that moves my soul. You can sort of laugh off her and be like, oh yeah, Whitney Houston, the pop star. I would task you with this. If you're someone who heard me say Whitney Houston or thought Whitney Houston, the pop singer, stop this video after this bit. Go and put on the karaoke track version of I Want to Dance with Somebody or How Will I Know and try and sing through that. The same key that she sang it and remain in pitch. I mean, just insane vocal technique. And I know that she had lots of struggles in her life, including drug use and the decline of her voice possibly related to the drug use, the speculation about her sexuality. And I know there's been a lot of things printed about that and people talk about that in books that are released, but we never got to hear anything really from her. Some of the documentaries that have been made since her passing are incredible, but even though she didn't know they were going to be made, so she didn't have a hand in that, the narrative or the way the story was told. And I would just have loved to have known, in her words, what was it like to be able to do that, to be able to project that sound whenever you wanted to. Like, wow. my recommendation for her, A Song for You by Robin Crawford. For those that don't know, Robin was her best friend and for a long time worked with her until they parted ways due to reasons that this book goes into. There's also lots of speculation about her and Robin being in a romantic relationship, also discussed in this book in a lot of detail. And of all the books I've read about Whitney Houston, this is the most respectful and loving one. It's not tabloid trash. It's basically her worshipping Whitney Houston the way I think she should be worshipped. And I just really recommend it. I think it's incredible, and it's the closest we get to a memoir from Whitney herself. My next pick, again, is icons. I'm realizing as I do this that it's mainly music artists, which says a lot about me as a person, I guess. I'm just going to jump into it. Queen. I don't need to say any more than that, I think. I could just turn it off there. But Queen, the band, all four of them, if any of them wrote a book, I would be over the moon. I feel like there's actually less chance of John Deacon writing a book, despite the fact that Freddie is dead. Freddie Mercury is the sort of person who probably would have kept journals, diaries, you know, written things how he's feeling down the way that he did in his songs. So I think I wouldn't be shocked if in the next 50 years those diaries get released in volumes or whatever. Whereas John Deacon is very much stepped away from the limelight and doesn't really want anything to do with the machine of Queen, aside from royalties, which is fair enough. They're another part of my life, really, that I was raised on them. My family loves them. I've got friends that love them. I've managed to go see Queen and Adam Lambert. My partner is obsessed with them. And I had the absolute privilege this year going to a launch for the IMAX concert film that's on Disney Plus at the moment. It was incredible. The sound was incredible, massive screen. But the absolute highlight was that the surprise guest was Brian May. So for me, guitar player who has worshipped Brian May for a long time, I was so starstruck. Like, even thinking about it, I've got photos, I'll put one here. And I still can't believe that actually happened. I was so close to him, and he kept smiling at us and then waved at the end, and I was just like, ah. There are some books, there's like photo books and things, and there's a book about the Red Special. There is a mountain of unauthorized books. My favourite one, definitive biography of Freddie Mercury, also called Bohemian Rhapsody. I've read it multiple times, so it's a bit battered. By Leslie Ann Jones. She's a journalist who worked with Queen in the past. She met Freddie a couple of times, interviewed him, so it's not one that they had a really bad relationship with and wrote awful things about them. So I think it's very respectful, very well sourced, lots of photos and things in there as well. Two more mentions would be Jim Hutton's book, Mercury and Me. So Jim Hutton, for those that don't know, was Freddie's partner, who has now sadly passed away as well. They lived together, they were very much in love, had a very normal relationship if you take away the fact that Freddie was a megastar. And the book chronicles that. And then also Peter Freestone's book, which I believe is called Freddie Mercury. And that is about being Freddie Mercury's assistant, long-time assistant, and he's often in documentaries and things interviewed about Freddie. I really am holding out hope that Brian May, because I think out of all of them, he loves to be active on Instagram, he's often writing his big paragraphs. I really hope he does a book soon. The next one is probably going to be seen as a little bit of a random pick. It is someone that I really enjoy the work they do. They're in quite a few franchises that I adore, and it's Henry Cavill. The main thing that I see him as is Superman. I love Superman. Superman is my favourite superhero, comic book thing, movies, whatever. I thought Henry's portrayal of Superman was absolutely amazing, and then he sort of got sidelined for a couple of years, and then he got announced that he was coming back as Superman, and then that all fell through. And then he was in The Witcher, and I love The Witcher books, and I love those before and the game that they made the series, and I loved it with him in it, and I loved his passion towards the source material, and then that sort of fizzled out and fell away. And there were rumours that he might be James Bond, and I like James Bond, but then that sort of fell away, and I just feel like he's had this really bumpy ride, and I'd be interested to get his perspective, because we get a lot of rumours about what has happened and what he said and they said and why he fell out with the writers, but we never get his definitive opinion. So yeah, I think I'd love to see a book from Henry Cavill. When Man of Steel came out, I went to see it 7 times at the cinema, and I also won a competition once where you had to prove that you were a big Superman fan, and I won with this photo. Which, looking at it now, there's not even that much memorabilia there. I've probably got more than that now, so much so that we have to store a lot of it at my mum's house. And it's funny that you can't really tell. But to me, this would look like the Fortress of Solitude. I'd have a red cape on, an S, but such is life. There aren't really any books I can recommend, because all the biographies and things are pretty cheap, flimsy ones that the book reviews are ripped to shreds. So I would just recommend maybe go read some Superman, go read The Witcher. We need to preface this next one without the build-up. and just tell you I am Beehive. I am absolutely Beehive. Quite simply, I think that Beyonce is everything. A book by Beyonce, I don't even feel like I want to elaborate, but I'll try. I will try and elaborate. I think it would be amazing. I think, especially the last decade has been, in terms of the shift, like when she first was making albums, and again, I say this is Beehive, absolute Beehive, so don't come for me. It was all quite safe. It was like pop music about love and heartbreak and all these things, and then there was a shift, sort of 2015, that sort of time, where things had to get a bit more political and a bit more what some would see as outspoken, and it was sort of creating more friction and waves. And I just think it's been so interesting to watch that, and how she sort of doesn't really buy into the traditional way that things are marketed, and she'll sort of just drop an album and then disappear. And even we've got to the point now as Beyonce fans where we don't even get music videos. So a book would be something different, so she could be like, oh, you know, I've done something different, something still art, but it's not the same thing I normally do. And I wouldn't be surprised if her third act of Renaissance, because it is supposed to be a 3-part thing, is a book. When I tried to do some research and see if there are any books about Beyonce, the most recent unofficial autobiography was released in 2014, so that makes you consider. And I apologise if you're not a Beyonce fan, you can skip forward to this bit because you're probably thinking, why is he going into so much detail? But for those that are fans, that means that that book doesn't even cover Lemonade, Renaissance, or Cowboy Carter, which is just like, because they are definitive albums, and for someone to do that so far into their career, it's pretty crazy. It's sort of mind-blowing that Beyonce's biggest record sales are coming at this point when she's releasing this new music, and the tours, similar to when Taylor Swift was in London, it was just a whole, I can't even explain it. It was just, the whole city just changed. It was bizarre, but also amazing for me as a massive fan. I love a book from Beyonce, and when I think about the effort that goes into those rare visuals we do get, like album covers and things, and it would probably be so stunning. I don't know what it would look like. I'm sort of picturing something simple in my head, but I just think it would look so amazing. And the bits of writing she has done, like she's done articles for Vogue, and we get these tiny crumbs about her life, and it's really beautifully written. And I just think it'd be amazing, because yeah, I'd love a book. So if Beyonce, if you see this, or anyone from the team, if Parkwood, please, you're not going to give us the visuals or the Formation World Tour DVD, then I'll take a book. Thank you. There are no recommendations for a Beyonce book, because as I said, the most recent one was unofficial and 2014. I'm not going to recommend those. So if you want to learn about her, I would listen to Lemonade, Renaissance, and Cowboy Carter, because they're recent and she's very raw and honest. So that is everyone on my official list. But as I was going, I did think of I'll say a bonus memoir / memoirs that I would like to see. Now I've had time to think about it. It's sort of obvious, but I'm still gonna say it. Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint. If they released autobiographies, the world would just be shook. It was nothing as big as Harry Potter, and I don't know if there ever will be again, especially when the movies were coming out like year to year. At one point I was working in a restaurant. The film was due out that night, and it was the first and only, and probably only time ever, that I was there, and at least one person on every table was in wizard robes and costume, and I'd never seen that before. I've never been to a movie premiere since where everyone's in like fancy dress and just absolutely obsessed with the franchise start level. So it was incredible, but it makes you wonder, what was it like to be a child, to become overnight success to like a mega level, like just so famous. But then not just stop there, because you've got to do it for like 12 years. So every time another film comes out, that fame's pushed a little bit higher and a little bit higher. I just can't even imagine. And we've had glimpses into what that could have been like, because we had a recent release from Tom Felton, which was Beyond the Wand, which obviously I read because I love Harry Potter. I had a Harry Potter bedroom as a child. Like I love Harry Potter before it was a movie, so I feel like that's the OG thing. It came out in 1997, I believe. I got Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone for anyone who's not from the UK. Was absolutely obsessed with it, and I would be counting down to the book releases. And I remember being told there was a film coming out and just being absolutely overwhelmed with excitement. So when this came out, you can bet I got it on the day it came out, and I absolutely loved it. He does talk a little bit about what he observed for Rupert, Emma and Daniel in terms of the fame and how it was affecting them. But again, I'd like to hear it from them. I think that would be incredible. Also, unfortunately, I don't have the physical copy because I borrowed it from the library. Vanna Lynch also released a book called The Opposite of Hunting Butterflies, which deals with the darker side more in depth. So there's talk of her eating disorder, which is sort of the focus of the book, and it is quite a hard read, but I think it's an important read, so I would absolutely check that one out as well. And then the final recommendation there has got to be the Alan Rickman Diaries, because Professor Snape, I mean, come on. So that's the end of my fantasy memoir launch. I'd love to hear who you guys thought of as I was going through my list. You could choose anyone to do a memoir or autobiography. Who would it be? I'd love to hear from you guys. As always, thank you so much for the support. Please like and subscribe, keep the support coming. I really enjoy doing these BookTube videos, and I still feel so new to it, so I'm learning all the time and trying to just think of things that will be fun for you to watch. I don't want it to just always be me walking around shops and filming books, but if that's what you enjoy, then let me know and I'll do more of that. Although it is a little bit more exhausting and London's a big place. But yeah, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to hearing you guys sort of dream autobiography releases. And until next time, take care.